Hello, welcome to the fifth podcast. This one is going to be an even further departure from the track in which I was originally sequencing the podcasts, because this one is, I guess, a very personal subject. It relates to the cancer diagnosis that I had back in 2021 and everything that happened during that year. Clearly I'm still here, so it's no surprise, at least partially, what the outcome of that was. And what I want to do is really outline some of the things that happened during that year. And again, if we go back to the original podcast in which I said, well, these are very much about passing on information, passing on things that have been a blessing to you and experience that you've gone through, and then relating it to somebody else. This is very much in that vein, really. So I want to give you a certain amount of detail, but not so much that that it's just not relevant at all. But I want to keep things very much in the vein of what actually happened that year, and the blessing that that the Lord put upon my life during that time, and the fact that he delivered me. I've recently had a bunch of further results when you're declared clear of cancer. You go through a period that they call the deferral pathway. So that's a medical administration term that essentially says, right, they monitor you every 3 months initially, and then every 6 months, and then every year, and so on, so long as things are going well for you. And it's no small thing that they did go well. And so really I want to say a little bit about what happened that year and since then. That word cancer is, as soon as it relates to yourself or somebody very close to you, is a bombshell in anyone's life. And it's not always just a binary, a on and off type situation. It's very often something that you have a number of warning signs, and then you progressively get to the point at which you're told definitively that it is a diagnosis. And what was strange about the diagnosis that I had was, anybody who knows me personally, anybody who knows much about me knows that I'm very involved with prison ministry. And the leader of Newark Prison Fellowship prior to me was a gentleman called Robert Ellis, who was a very, very close friend of mine. And he was somebody who had run Newark Prison Fellowship for I think it was slightly over 30 years. And he passed on the leadership of Newark's Prison Fellowship to myself, for no other reason that his eyes were failing somewhat, and driving was going to become a problem to him. And I think he also thought that it was time to pass on the baton, so to speak. But Robert and I received our diagnosis within a week of each other, and we both received cancer diagnoses. He had stomach cancer, and I had rectal cancer. If we go back to 2021, which of course was during the COVID lockdown periods, this was not an ideal time to to get a serious diagnosis of anything. But during that time, I was due to go into Newark Hospital. I live in Newark, or in the outlying area, and so essentially, I was due to go in on my birthday, and I semi-suspected, what the results may be, because of a number of blood tests and a number of things that my doctor had already arranged in order for me to be checked out. And essentially, I was due to go in on my birthday, which is January the 10th. And that was in 2021. So essentially, I said, right, okay, that's not the type of birthday present that I fancy. So I decided to reschedule it for a day. Fortunately, they allowed me to do that, and to cut a long story short, I went through the colonoscopy procedure, which people may know from either experience or from their friends or family. That essentially is a camera, going deep into your bowel and so on. And yes, they as the procedure was coming to an end, I started hearing the consultant use this word lesions and so on, and I thought, that doesn't sound good. They called myself and my wife into the nurse's office immediately after, and said, who's your next of kin? And of course, it was my wife. So I called her on the phone, and and they said, well, we have to take biopsies, but you've almost certainly got cancer. And at the time you hear that, then obviously it's like a hammer blow when you hear it, and you hear it in conjunction with yourself. At the time, I felt quite peaceful about it, and I thought that I was handling it very well. Until the next morning. So the next morning I had to do a speed awareness course. I'd been speeding on a particular road in Newark. Because it was COVID during the time, all of the courses had to be done online. There were no face-to-face courses. So as I say, it was lockdown. I was about to log on to this course, and all of a sudden I couldn't find my email. Now, I sought decades worth of emails into various folders, very, very organised. I'm an IT person, so therefore it was doubly exasperating to me that I couldn't find this invitation email to log on to this course. Then all of a sudden I found myself absolutely going ballistic, and then thinking, where did that come from? And of course, where it came from was the fact that it was a visceral response to the diagnosis I'd just received. And this is where Robert Ellis comes in again, because Robert, was just in the process of receiving his diagnosis. I'd managed to reschedule the speed awareness course to another day, so it meant that I wasn't going to lose the money that I'd spent on that. Was beginning to calm down a little bit, but then he rang, and he was talking, and he was just completely phlegmatic, and he was saying, well, you've just got to get on with it, haven't you, Leon? It's no use, sort of putting your chin on the floor and all this type of thing. And I suppose perhaps some people might hear that and think, well, sounds cliched, but it isn't a cliche if it's coming from somebody who's in that exact same situation as you are yourself, or near enough exact. you're both in a club that nobody wants to belong to, and Robert was just himself, the way that he only ever knew how to be, which was just positive and upfront and full of the joy of the Lord, I guess, really, and it just did me so much good, and I suppose it was the one occasion in which you could say that I really wobbled in inverted commas. And this is the thing, when you're in that situation, when you're in the circumstances in which you suddenly find that all sorts of strange things go through your mind. You look at the seasons, you look at, something that's flowering, and you think, well, will I see that next year? You look at various things that are due to happen here, there, and elsewhere, and think, well, I may not be around to experience that. The strangest thing went through my mind at the time was that they were due to do a lot of roadworks, and the various Newark bypasses and so on were going to be changed, and they're still yet to be done. So I thought, well, I guess I won't see all that lot then. I would like to see how that turned out. Roadworks of all things was something that I was mindful of. And you think all sorts of things. And one of the things that I want to say this, that I hope is by the way of encouragement to you, is this. It comes from Proverbs 18:21. It says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit." And that works two ways, really. Is, you can say negative things in your life that perhaps curse may be too strong a word, but perhaps sometimes it isn't. But you can speak negativity into your life, but you can speak God's promises into your life, and that is a very, very different thing than what you see some people who almost talk like motivational speakers these days about constantly being positive. Well, you could being positive, yes. It has a certain value in your life, but the positivity has to be based upon something. It has to be grounded in reality. And if something is true scripturally, and if something is true in the Lord, then it's a very, very different than what people call the power of positive thinking. Trying to speak things that aren't necessarily the case, or may just be related to the temporal things of this world. There's a huge difference to talking about things that are based upon scriptural reality. When I was walking the dog, I go for an hour's walk with the dog every single morning. And as I was walking him this morning and thinking about this podcast, something that I very much believe came from the Lord, came to me, is that all healing, no matter whether you're talking about emotional healing, whether you're talking about spiritual healing, whether you're talking about physical healing, all healing is based upon truth. Now, you might find it strange that I use that word truth in conjunction with something like healing, because even if you're looking at it from the point of view of a medical professional or something, one of the first things they look for when you go visit your GP, when you go visit a specialist or something, is they seek the truth of the situation in as much as they can ascertain. So they will find out the background, what you've been doing, your lifestyle, have you been drinking, have you been smoking, and then they'll look for a scan or an ultrasound or something like that. If they're trying to identify a virus, they're looking to identify the truth of the situation. And by the same token, that is true in the spiritual realm as well. And it's also true emotionally, with emotional healing as well. But I'm speaking on this occasion specifically about physical healing. You know, that really blessed me when I thought about that this morning. As I say, I underwent various scans and so on, and went through a period in which, once you've received your diagnosis, once your biopsies have come back, and so on. So you have a number of scans, CT scans, MRI scans, and so on. They're looking for whether it's spread. They're looking at the extent to which, the tumour exists in the first place. And so they identified with me that it was a T3, which is, the extent of the tumour. Let's put it this way, you don't want a T4. T4, they start talking about palliative care and so on. So it was a T3 and an N0. N, as I understand it, relates to the spread of the of the cancer. So essentially, we're saying that it was, that it was a profound cancer in the first place, but it hadn't spread to other areas at that point in time. And so then you have your meeting with your consultant, and I had a meeting with a consultant and the Macmillan nurse. And the Macmillan nurse, now I don't want to give in any way the impression that it was a fractious conversation. It certainly wasn't. It was, it was a very cordial conversation. But, the Macmillan nurse later on described that as having been, quite a difficult conversation, because we were not in agreement as the way forward. The consultant, who was very experienced and very senior, and describe himself jokingly as a plumber, because essentially, he would repipe your innards, sort of accordingly. And he was very much for removing the whole area, leaving me with a permanent stoma and doing life-altering surgery to me. And as I've said many, many times since, people watching this podcast may have a stoma at the moment. I mean, no disrespect to anybody who's gone down that route. Given the choice of having a stoma and not having one, I certainly didn't want to have one. And I believed this was that the Lord was the one who would have the final say as to what the outcome of this would be. And as I was in that meeting, that was the line that I did not want to cross. I did not want to hand preeminence of the outcome. I didn't want to hand the outcome to the consultant. Now, I want to say this, and I want to say this as a caveat. During my whole experience of the diagnosis and the treatment that I received and the care that I was under, I never met anybody who was anything less than excellent. I hear all sorts of horror stories on the media, let's put it that way, as regards as regards cancer coverage in this cancer treatment coverage in this country. I there's not a single person that I dealt with who was anything less than excellent. The treatment that I received was absolutely first class. It was timely, and a lot of the people were very caring, dedicated individuals. So I don't have a single word of negativity towards any healthcare professionals that I encountered. That said, it doesn't necessarily mean that I would have the same life view as somebody who thinks, right, unless essentially what happens, within the medical diagnosis, within the group of consultants that get together to discuss your case, they regard themselves as the ultimate authority. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that it's people with a God complex or anything like that. Some may have. If they have, then that's their issue. But as far as I was concerned, the outcome was in the Lord's hands. One of the things, there were two things that the Lord laid very, very heavily upon my heart during the time that I was going through that whole experience that year. And there were two things that related to really quite sort of detailed scriptures within the Bible. And the first one was was based on the atonement sacrifice. And the fact that the high priest in Leviticus used to have to sprinkle the blood of the sacrifice around. In fact, I tell you what, let's read from somewhere. I'm going to read Leviticus 16, verse 2 and 3. It says, "Tell Aaron your brother not to come at just any time into the holy place inside the veil before the mercy seat, which is on the ark, lest he die. For I will appear in the cloud above the mercy seat. Thus Aaron shall come into the holy place with the blood of the young bull as a sin offering and of a ram as a burnt offering." And I just want to go onto chapter 17. Chapter 17 and verse 11 says, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it unto you unto the altar to make atonement for your souls." Now, it's not the atonement aspect of that I'm concentrating on at the moment. It says the life is in the blood. So here's the thing, that as I was having this conversation with somebody who clearly knew much more about medical things than I do. I always call myself a medical illiterate, really. And his knowledge of the subject matter was so much greater than mine. But this I knew more so than him, was that my life was in the palm of God's hand. Life belongs to God, and knowing that my life belonged to the Lord was so important for me to know. So, and I remember saying at the time to several people, I said, my life is as much in the palm of God's hand right at this moment. That I've know about the diagnosis, as it was a year ago, where I knew nothing about it, or for all I know, may not have had any cancer at that time. Every single point that my life was in the palm of God's hands. And that was a huge reassurance to me. So what the Macmillan nurse referred to as the difficult conversation was essentially this, was that the consultant wanted me to have everything removed, and I was saying, no, I don't want to go down that route. I want to see if I can get out of this essentially fully intact. So I really stuck to those guns, and I felt as if I was saying something that they very much didn't want to hear at the time. And, you know, professionally and medically and so on, I'm sure they had very good reason for taking that standpoint. But as I say, it's the Lord who has the ultimate authority on these things. And so the other thing was that when you're in a situation in which essentially there is really no margin for error, one of the things that the consultant said during that meeting was essentially, if I didn't have the surgery, that I had about between 2 and 2.5 years to live. And he just dropped that in really what I thought was quite casually. And that certainly gets your attention when somebody talks in that way. And what you're looking for, and this is where I hope that this podcast is a help and a blessing to people that might watch it, listen to it, whatever, is that when you're in a situation, as I say, that is life and death. So when you think about a lot of the Psalms that David wrote, a lot of them were written in what we know from other parts of the Bible were life and death situations. Life and death situations clearly focus the mind. As I say, you feel as if there is little or no margin for error in what you do, what you pray, but more really in what you know about the Lord. And sorry, I'm making this sound very much as if it's oriented towards the individual. It's not oriented towards the individual, it's oriented towards the faithfulness of God. And it's the faithfulness of God that you lean on. And so very much in that vein, I was taught the thing that the Lord laid very heavily upon my heart was this, you know, when Abraham took Isaac onto Mount Moriah and was going to have to potentially sacrifice him. In fact, I tell you what, I'll read it directly from what it says in Hebrews about it, as opposed to reading it from Genesis. And it's Hebrews 11, verse 17 to 19. It says, "And by faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son." Well, there's a parallel for you, isn't it? "Of whom it is said, in Isaac your seed shall be called," concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he received him in a figurative sense. So, okay, well, how's that relevant to my situation? The relevancy is this, is that when Abraham went up to Mount Moriah, he didn't know how on earth God was going to deliver him in that situation. He just knew that he would. And it's only in the New Testament that we actually see that. It's not really written into Genesis, but it's saying that Abraham already knew that God could raise Isaac from the dead. In other words, he could deliver him within the situation. And so here's the thing that I really believe can be of a help to you, because it was of a help to me. I didn't know whether God was going to heal me directly, whether he was going to engineer the outcome through the medical profession. And frankly, I didn't care. All I wanted was to know that I would be delivered at the end of it. And praise the Lord, he did. Now, as it turned out, the Lord did intervene miraculously. And I'll explain now, actually, come to think of it, is that the consultant had already said was that whatever radiotherapy and chemotherapy I was going to have would not eradicate the tumour. It was only going to be a precursor to try and stop the spread of it, and to reduce it as much as possible. So in a way, it was like the run up to the main event. But as it turned out, I did not have to have that life altering surgery, and so I went through a period of radiotherapy, a period of chemotherapy, and I spoke to so many people who were going through the same thing at the same time. I spoke to my cousin and to friends who'd had the exact same chemotherapy, and it had a terrible response to them. And please do not think that I'm boasting in myself, that it's a bit like somebody says, oh well, I broke my leg, and says, well, I'm okay, I've got two. God forbid, I certainly don't want to do that. But equally, I do want to give God the glory for the fact that there should have been many things that should have very negatively affected me. In Mark 16:19, it talks about the fact that that you can, if you ingest any deadly substance, that it will not affect you. And I stood on those promises. I stood on those promises and spoke them out and confessed them. And so when you think about what chemotherapy is, it is essentially poisoning your system. It's to poison your system and to eradicate the cancerous cells and so on, and it has it can potentially have a hugely negative effect upon you. And something, it just didn't touch me in that way. And I went through a period of I think it was about 6, maybe 7 weeks. I can't remember. Certainly 6 weeks of daily radiotherapy, and we didn't know whether I'd be able to be well enough to drive in the 45-minute journey to City Hospital in Nottingham. But I drove in absolutely every day, and so if any of you remember an old Rod Taylor film called The Time Machine. And the Time Machines, was this wonderful machine that transported him to different eras and so on. But the point that I'm making about it is that it had all of these weird and wonderful things that rotated around him in that film. Well, the radiotherapy machine is very much like that. It's this, you lay on this bed essentially, and you have to drink a great deal so that essentially it protects your bladder and so on. A great deal of water, should I say. All these radiation things sort of rotate around you while you're on your bed, and it all looks very sort of science fiction while it's happening. But during those times, I was again, I thought about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the book of Daniel. It says that they were thrown into the fire, but they were not burnt. And so, the prayer that I made to the Lord was, oh God, you are the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And look, I am not trying to say the reason why I am here is because I was particularly virtuous and particularly skillful at praying from the Bible or anything like that. God forbid. I'm certainly not claiming that it was due to me in any way. No, it is very much according to what he is, the character of God, the fact that he is faithful, the fact that he is unchanging, the fact that he healed people back in the times of the Old Testament or the times of the New Testament, and he's still in the business of doing it today. And as I once said when I was getting up and testifying about this, God can change us at a cellular level. He is the one who created our bodies in the first place. In Psalm 139, it says that we were fearfully and wonderfully made, and so he can do these things. He can do these things, and when you see him do these things, and when you experience him doing these things, then it is just such a blessing to see that he is still in the business of being faithful, of delivering people. And so another thing that I used to pray again, and it goes back to what I was saying about Proverbs. It says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. And that can be a positive thing within our lives. As I say, it's not the power of positive thinking. It's about speaking out, letting your body hear, letting your own ears hear the promises of God. And I've got as you can see, I've got a notice board up here, and where you can't completely see it on there, but just in that space where you see the white sheet of A4, I used to have this Psalm 103. It says, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquities, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from destruction, and who crowns you with loving kindness and tender mercies, who satisfies your mouth with good things, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. And I started to live on those promises, and to quote and to quote them as I was on the radiotherapy table and so on. And this is what I'm saying is that any one of us can do, because you cannot always control what goes on in your mind, what enters your mind, but you can control what comes out of your mouth. And if, as I say, let your ears hear your mouth confess the good things of the Lord, and they will become more and more a reality in your life. I must have said it 2 or 3 times already. It is not the power of positive thinking. That is motivational nonsense as far as I'm concerned. And that's very much the spirit of this world and so on. And people who are into modern speak and modern think, like to talk about positivity. But as I say, healing has to be based upon truth. And so when you are speaking God's promises out, you are speaking the truth of the situation. For all that was going off at the time, now it was, obviously I'm not going to compromise anybody's privacy or anything like that, but I think I'm reasonably safe in saying that the first name of my oncologist was somebody called Raphael, and he was a Jewish gentleman. Anyway, and I looked into the meaning of his name, and of course you've only got to think of Jehovah Rapha, our God, our healer, and that was very much what his name means. But that said, when I was called in for a meeting with him, as a consultation, however you term it, he said, well, I'm afraid the tumour is not reducing to the extent that we hoped that it would. So I remember saying to him at the time, I said, well, look, I've experienced a great deal of tragedy within my life. I said, so this is not completely foreign territory to me. I said, and if I have to die, then I'll face that with courage and and do what I've got to do. But I contacted a friend of mine, and this friend has now become a pastor. I don't think he was then. And I thought, obviously you tell quite a few people what's going on in your life, and I thought, oh good grief, he's going to be really upset. And so I rang my friend John up, thinking right, how am I going to frame this? No, I don't think I did ring at first. I think I messaged him on WhatsApp and let him know on that. I'm not 100% sure. Well, I could tell you he was having none of it. He just said, no, you're going to be healed. And that's that. And do you know something? It just did me so much good to hear that sort of faith. And it, again, a little bit like the time that I rang my friend Robert, something like that can really, really lift you, and so on at the time. And he says, declare in the name of Jesus, you're going to be healed. And so we met up as we periodically did, and we met of all places at a place called the Refectory at Southwell Minster. Southwell's a village stroke town not far from Newark. Some people might know it as Southwell, and it's got a cathedral there, or a minster as it's called. So we had something to eat, and we were talking, we were encouraging each other, and he said I said to him, said, go have a word with those, young ladies who were serving at the moment. Ask them for, for a little bit of olive oil. And so they gave him, a tiny little cap, I think, of olive oil. They had no problem with doing that. And so we went out to the grounds of Southwell Minster. We didn't go into the Minster itself. It made no difference. The Lord can hear us perfectly well, outdoors as much as indoors. And I said, I want you to anoint me with oil and to pray for me. And he did, and we were obedient to the time. And now look, all sorts of people pray for you during your illness, and I don't want to say, look, it's this person, rather than that person. You receive the prayers of anybody gratefully, and if anyone lifts you up to the throne of God, how can that be anything but a good thing? From then on, things really seemed to change for me, and at that point, I would often go walking perhaps out with the dog or something like that, and I would just, a little bit like Naaman the Syrian in the River Jordan, what was it, Elisha, I think, and he was dipped in the Jordan 7 times, and I just used to think, and this was, I don't want anyone to think that I'm setting up some sort of formula here. I'm not. It says in Psalm 31, doesn't it? It says he fashions our hearts individually. So the way that God deals with me will not be the way that he deals with you. And that's the same of all loving parents, isn't it? He knows, he knows exactly what each one of us needs. But I just used to say, as I did it, as I walked along, I would just say, I am healed, 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 I am healed. By his stripes I am healed. So I would say I am healed 7 times. And that was just something that I was led to do. But as I did that each time it came out of my mouth, my ears, my body are hearing the truth that is in the gospel. And it says, and God spoke the world into existence, and by that token, life and death is in the power of tongue. Life definitely is in our case, and we can speak the truth of the Lord, and the more that we speak it out, the more that we confess it, then there is power in that, and for that I make no apology. If somebody thinks that this is some sort of name it and claim it sort of trendy doctrine or something like that, it isn't. This isn't something new. This is something thousands of years old. This is something beyond thousands of years old. And my book, the same friend who prayed for me and anointed me at Southwell at that time, also sent me a book called Christ the Healer. And I started reading about the promises of God regarding healing. And one of the things that it was saying within there, and I've mentioned this before, even within the Old Covenant, there was provision for physical healing. So how much more within the New Covenant is there provision for physical healing? Why would anyone think that has ceased with the apostles, ceased sort of 2,000 years ago or anything like that? No, God is very much in the business of healing people, and I speak that as somebody who has been healed. And so that book really made it clear to me that it is God's will that to heal you. Now, everything happens within context within life, but a lot of the time, I think that I've heard people pray in the past, God, if it is your will, heal this person. And I don't, and one of the things that reading that book, and again, it is not that I am just extolling the book. The man, I think, wrote it the best part of a century ago. But it was something that was very much a reality within his ministry. And it is something that is true. And when you've experienced it yourself, and when you've had the reality of that within your own life, then again it comes down to the scripture. It says, "We speak the things that we do know." And so I'm speaking the thing that I do know because I've experienced this within my life. And so what I wanted to make sure that happened during the time of my diagnosis was that I knew that I'd be due for a meeting with the consultants, the oncologists, and so on at a certain time. But I didn't want to be hanging on to the words of a consultant. And again, I'm in no way detracting from medical professionals. And just simply speaking, a spiritual reality is that you should know something in yourself first. You should know it within your spirit as being a truth first, because you have constantly confessed it, because you have believed it, and it has become a reality within your life. I knew that I knew that I was due for for particular sort of consultations. The Lord laid it heavily upon my heart that I was healed weeks, maybe a month or two before I actually received the news. Now, I know exactly when I received the news because it is, any Brit will know the term remember the 5th of November. Well, I remembered the 5th of November because of what happened to me, because that was when I received the confirmation that I was cancer free. And so what I had been told would definitely not happen was that the tumor would go, did happen. And strangely enough, it seemed to be a bit of an embarrassment to the consultants. I almost got the impression that they were more embarrassed about being wrong, and something inexplicable happened. And my top consultant even said, well, you might still want to have the whole area removed still. I said, why would I possibly want that? But he put that up as as a possibility. He said, well, some people would. I can't imagine why that would be the case, but obviously I was just overjoyed. And yes, I did punch the air when I received the news on November the 5th. But I knew within my spirit before November the 5th, I would say at least 6 weeks before, because the Lord had made it a reality within my spirit during that time. And please do not think that I'm bigging myself up in any way with this, because everything about this was what the Lord did. Just read this passage from Isaiah 53, starting at verse 4. And it's one of the most famous passages regarding healing that there is anywhere. And I'm going to read it in both the Old and the New Testament, or certain parts of it in the Old and the New Testament. It says, "Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God and afflicted. He was wounded for our transgressions, and he was bruised for our iniquities. And the chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed." And just going back to verse 4, I want to show you where that is re-quoted in Matthew in chapter 8 and verse 16 and 17. And it gives a little bit of context here. And it says, "And when the evening had come, they brought to him many who were demon possessed, and he cast out the spirits with the words and healed all those who were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, He himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses." And I used to listen to this recording. I've got it on my phone of I think it's the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir singing Psalm 34, and that's the one. So Psalm 34 says, "I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise will continually be in my mouth. My soul will make a boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear of it and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and he delivered me from all my fears. They looked to him and were radiant, and their faces were not ashamed. This poor man cried out, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all of his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around all those who fear him and delivers them." And okay, they don't sing that word for word, but they paraphrase it. And I just used to praise, well, yes, I did used to praise the Lord, but I just used to sing that, play that over and over again, and sing it. And this is also one of the things that I would say about, the Lord is faithful and the Lord is a deliverer. And when the Lord does heal you, and when the Lord does deliver you, and when he does something for you within your situation, then that is a gift to the church. And I used to say this quite regularly at the time. If you look in Luke 5 verse 14, Jesus instructed, instructed, I think it may have been a leper, I can't quite remember. It says he charged him to tell no one, but go and show yourself to the priest and make an offering for your cleansing and as a testimony to them, just as Moses commanded. So one of the things that, God's miraculous healings was significant of was the fact that the Messiah had come, the Messiah had manifested himself, and that these things were happening in a way that had never been seen before. And so, as I say, when the Lord does something for you in that way, it is a gift to the church, and we have a responsibility to speak of the things that God has done and to proclaim his faithfulness and to say that he is faithful, that he is a deliverer, and that he can do things that no one else can do. And so I hope that has been an encouragement to you. It was certainly an encouragement to me to be in that situation, and now and again I just have to pinch myself and think, well, Lord, you are everything that you ever said that you would be, and the nature of God is such that there is no one, if they are born again, who hasn't experienced the miraculous. Because if you are born again, if you know Christ as your Lord and Saviour, there is even if you were decapitated and grew another head, it would not there's a thought, nothing is as miraculous as salvation itself. If you are in Christ, you have passed from death unto life. You have started within the miraculous. I'm not talking hairy fairy nonsense here. I'm talking about what is profound spiritual reality. So we should not be surprised that the Lord does the things that he always said he would. He is faithful. He will do the things that he has said and that he is committed to. Praise the Lord. Amen.